Hello, everyone. Hey, Kay, how are you? This is Empowering Democracy. It's another Dump the Corruption show. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And we're going to cover another article on Trump and SCOTUS from Slate and also discuss the donor money that has been very relevant to what's been going on in Gaza and also the donor money going into election denial activities. So this is all very relevant, okay, to dump the corruption. So here we are. I'm going to start with the Trump article. Okay, this is an article that directly confronts the claim that taking Trump off the ballot, okay, is anti-democratic. And the headline says that all. There is nothing anti-democratic about removing Trump from the ballot. The authors are Norman L. Eisen, Joshua Kolb, and Andrew Warren. And this article was published on January 10th, 2024 by Slate at 1:28 p.m. And here is a photo of Donald Trump speaking at a rally on October 18, 2016 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is by Theo Strumer from Getty Images. Last week, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a momentous case whether former President Donald Trump can be removed from state ballots under the disqualification clause of the 14th Amendment for having, quote, engaged, okay, in insurrection, unquote. The question is unprecedented, and the High Court and the public may or may not agree with Colorado Supreme Court's disqualification of the former president. But there should be no disagreement about this. Pressing the question is not, quote, antithetical, unquote, okay, to democracy. As former Vice President Pence said on Sunday, rather, it is in the best tradition of American democracy to ask if the Constitution applies here and to enforce it, okay, if it does. The Colorado courts found that Trump's role in connection with the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol constituted engaging in insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Indeed, every judicial fact finder to reach the question has agreed, including the Maine Secretary of State, and a majority of the House and Senate concluded that Trump incited the insurrection. They are, in our view, correct. As we have explained in our scholarship, January 6th was an insurrection, and I believe they're citing an article of theirs from pogo.org. The article's entitled "The Constitution's Disqualification Clause Can Be Enforced but Today." Anyway, January 6th was an insurrection. Trump was a central part of it. And so the law and the facts clearly favored disqualification. Simple argument, but an effective one, I think. These conclusions are hardly partisan. In fact, leading conservative legal scholars and lawyers applying traditionally conservative tools of interpretation have provided the intellectual foundations for disqualification. they have persuasively demonstrated that Section 3 applies to the presidency and is self-executing and does not require congressional action for enforcement. As Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote when he was a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit and upheld Colorado's decision to prohibit a non-natural born citizen from the presidential ballot. That probably was Jack Uyghur. States have a quote, okay, legitimate interest in protecting the integrity and practical functioning, okay, of the political process, unquote. Okay, I take that back because I believe the decision about whether Jung could participate on the ballot was taken, okay, in Arkansas. So I may be wrong about that fact. Anyway, states have a quote, okay, legitimate interest in protecting the integrity and practical functioning of the political process. Further, okay, originalism, textualism, states' rights. These are the bedrock principles of the conservative legal movement. And these approaches all suggest that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment applies to Trump. Justice Gorsuch and his colleagues on the Supreme Court will now have to resolve these pointed legal issues. Okay, the justices have, I'm sorry, this thing is annoying me. Not sure how to get rid of it. Oh, there it is. Okay, the justices have undoubtedly begun wrestling with the broader question of whether it offends our democracy to disqualify Trump. Certainly America has. Critics of the disqualification clause have argued that applying Section 3 is inherently anti-democratic. For example, a respected GOP state official who has been lauded for his refusal to help Trump overturn that state's presidential election results penned, okay, an op-ed criticizing the disqualification cases. Quote, voters should decide the elections, unquote, wrote Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Quote, invoking the 14th Amendment is really the newest way of attempting to short circuit the ballot box, unquote. I have a comment to make about that. If Raffensperger thinks that voters ought to decide the elections, then why doesn't he come out against the very large contributions from private parties and from corporations and from PACs and super PACs that are deciding elections in his home state, okay, of Georgia? Because certainly in that state, very often it's money that decides elections and not voters. And by the way, if Trump were to run and win, okay, in Georgia, he would do so in large part because of all the money that he would have at his command, okay, to run with. This argument mistakenly conflates states' efforts to enforce the Constitution with the election interference and voter disenfranchisement Trump and his acolytes have perpetuated. Have perpetuated. In a democracy, the will of the people is expressed by the laws enacted by democratic means, as Section 3 was. Following the Civil War, supermajorities in both chambers of Congress passed the 14th Amendment, and the states then ratified the 14th Amendment. They chose to weave this safeguard into America's foundational fabric, rather than rely on voters in individual elections to decide whether ex-Confederate officers should be allowed to serve. The 14th Amendment permanently enshrines in the Constitution the privileges and protections of democracy. Moreover, Section 3 of that amendment is merely one of many qualifications the Constitution imposes on who can be president. We do not feel those are anti-democratic, and the same is true here. Republicans aren't caterwauling that it's an anti-democratic travesty that they can't vote for Arnold Schwarzenegger for president because he is foreign-born. Democrats aren't complaining that Representative Maxwell Frost, is ineligible to be a candidate in the 2024 presidential election because he is under age 35. Isn't the same true for AOC? Isn't she still under the age of 35? Yeah, if I recall correctly, she's about 31 or 32 now, so she's under the age of 35 also. Enforcing the disqualification clause is no different. Indeed, these other restrictions are far less essential to our democratic republic than the one contained in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Of course, the Constitution prevents anyone from serving as president who had previously attempted to overthrow the government they would be leading. An insurrectionist in the Oval Office would be far more dangerous than a President Schwarzenegger or a 28-year-old President Frost, and would pose a uniquely existential threat to the country. I think that point, is really a very good one. Also, if you look at it from the standpoint of an insurrectionist, the former president, who violated his oath of office, in trying to stop the certification, of the election. Clearly, having the same president there again would be asking for him to violate his oath of office again. You can't have people occupying the presidency who are going to violate their oath of office. Once they violated it once, and you elect them to the presidency, they're surely going to violate it again. Also, he violated his oath of office in many other ways. He violated, the emoluments clause of the Constitution, both the domestic emoluments clause and the foreign emoluments clause. In addition to disqualifying anyone who, quote, engaged in, quote, unquote, insurrection, unquote, from serving as president, one of the most important limitations on the presidency is that an individual cannot serve more than 2 terms. By the logic of those concerned that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is anti-democratic, so too is the 22nd Amendment, which establishes that term limit. Yeah, I have to say I always thought that the 22nd Amendment actually was anti-democratic because its purpose was to prevent another Franklin Roosevelt from being able to get a 3rd term in office or a 4th term in office because people wanted but to elect such a person. I think that requirement is definitely anti-democratic. In other words, a president who served us well and who did not violate his oath of office in any way, and who protected democracy in various ways, following Roosevelt, would not be able to win that 3rd term or that 4th term. So, yet no one is decrying as anti-democratic the fact that we cannot vote for George W. Bush, or Barack Obama for a 3rd term. Well, that's because people have accepted the 22nd Amendment. I mean, actually, when Donald Trump ran in 2016, I think many people would have greatly preferred if Barack Obama would have been able to run for a third term. They would certainly have preferred that he run as opposed to Hillary Clinton running against Trump. So there's that. But anyway, conversely, by enforcing the 14th Amendment, we are reinforcing the 22nd and the rest of the Constitution. We are doing that. Donald Trump has explicitly begun to muse about running for a third term in 2028 if he wins this year, claiming that since the 2020 election was stolen from him, quote unquote, he's entitled to terminate all rules in the Constitution and take an extra term, as recompense. While the notion may seem ridiculous, recall that many scoffed at concerns that Trump would attempt to hold on to power even if he lost the 2020 election. That, of course, is exactly what he did, right? Democracy works only when its rules are enforced consistently, irrespective of whether doing so is controversial or easy. Flouting the Constitution when it clearly applies, is anti-democratic. The idea that voters ought to decide elections should not mean that judges and other state officials are powerless to uphold candidate eligibility laws. These officials play a critical role in the functioning of our democracy. They have excluded candidates who violate the basic eligibility qualifications in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. The judges and officials making the decisions in Colorado and Maine are no different, and their decisions, regardless of how they rule, are pro-democracy so long as they are faithful to the rule of law. At least one person who engaged in the January 6th insurrection has already been disqualified under Section 3. Although a major party candidate for president has never been disqualified, there is nothing as democratic as applying the law equally to both an ex-president, and every other American. Also claims that using, quote, a constitutional interpretation to remove anybody from the ballot is going to be a dangerous precedent, unquote, are misguided. Upholding the Colorado decision would not create a wide-ranging precedent that could be used to disqualify any candidate. The decision was narrowly tailored to Colorado's election code and the evidence supporting the trial court's finding that Trump engaged in insurrection. A candidate would have to have engaged, quote unquote, in insurrection, quote unquote, comparable to the violent effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election led by Donald Trump. No presidential candidate's conduct since the passage of the 14th Amendment has ever come close to that definition of insurrection, quote unquote, and hopefully the country will not face such a threat again. Even if an avalanche of red state officials try to remove Joe Biden from the ballot in retaliation, as one has already threatened to do in Missouri, the federal judiciary is more than equipped to recognize and knock down such efforts. One of the primary purposes of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was to prevent the recurrence of insurrections. Thus, by enforcing the provision, the court would help fortify the country against anti-democratic forces that work to subvert the will of the people. Also, it would paralyze our democracy if government officials hesitated to properly apply the law for fear that other officials may retaliate by misapplying the law for political reasons. And that's it. I think that article makes a very strong argument for state officials doing their duty and barring Trump from the ballot. And I agree with the authors. There's nothing anti-democratic about that. There is only a concern to defend our democracy about that. By borrowing from the ballot someone who, by his own admission, is a great threat to our Constitution, okay, and to what we have remaining, okay, of a democracy. I don't agree we have a democracy anymore. But certainly, Trump would take us even further from a democracy than we currently are. So let's get into some of the reasons why we are not a democracy anymore by leaving this piece and by going to the next article. So the next article is from Portside, and I'll bring it up right now. Its headline is Revealed. Congress backers of Gaza war receive most from pro-Israel donors. Guardian analysis finds top recipients of pro-Israel contributions in last elections were centrist Democrats who defeated progressives in the primaries. The article is from The Guardian. It was published on January 10th, 2024, and the authors are Tom Perkins, with data reporting by Will Kraft. So, here's a Palestinian medic taking a baby pulled out of buildings destroyed in the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip in Rafah on October 22nd, 2023. So right when the Israelis were telling everybody from the north to head south, they were bombarding the Gaza Strip on October 22nd, 2023. Congress members who were more supportive of Israel at the start of the Gaza war received over $100,000 more on average from pro-Israel donors during their last election than those who most supported Palestine. A Guardian analysis of campaign data shows. Those who took more money most often called for U.S. military support and backed Israel's response, even if Gaza's civilian death toll mounted, the findings show. The analysis, which looks at positions taken during the war's first 6 weeks, does not prove any particular member changed their position because they received the pro-Israel campaign donations. However, some campaign finance experts who viewed the data argue that donor spending helped fuel Congress's overwhelming support for Israel. I would certainly argue that as well. The analysis compared campaign contributions from pro-Israel groups and individuals to almost every member of the current Congress, with each lawmaker's statements on the war through mid-November. About 82% of Congress members were more supportive of Israel, and just 9% more supportive of Palestine during this period. The remainder had views that were mixed, quote unquote. Legislators characterized as supportive of Israel received about $125,000 on average during their last election, while those supportive of Palestine on average took about $18,000. The volume and breadth of the donor spending is considerable. Over $58 million went to current Congress members, and all but 33 received donations. Okay, so there it is. Here's a little diagram that shows Chuck Schumer received $546,000. Susan Collins got $826,000. Chantel Brown, who won in Ohio, in the Nina Turner race, got $4.5 million. Haley Stevens, in Michigan, who was running, in a primary race. She was running, against Andy Levin, in a primary race that was pitting two Democrats against each other. In Andy Levin's case, he was a prominent Jewish person who came from a family that had an illustrious history in Congress, both in the Senate and in the House. Andy himself had been a very good congressman. He was deluged with contributions from pro-Israel donors to the tune of $5.4 million for his opponent, Haley Stevens. It should be noted, that Andy Levin was very prominent as a Jew in the congressional district he came from. He had been the president, of his synagogue for some years. He was no longer the president, but he certainly wasn't guilty of anti-Israeli views, or statements. What he was guilty of was supporting the idea that Palestinians have rights too. That's what the lobby objected to, and that's why they favored his opponent so heavily in that race, in Michigan. Also, Glenn Ivey, who's a Republican, got $7.2 million from the pro-Israel donors. That was very, very important in his race for the Congress. Only 9% were more supportive of Palestine. Andre Carson got $3,000. Also, Eric Swalwell got $29,000. And Rashida Tlaib got $0. The rest of Congress expressed views that were mixed. That is, 8% of Congress was equally supportive of Israel, and Palestine. Those who were equally supportive included Bernie Sanders, got $6,000. Also, Dick Durbin got $130,000. And Elizabeth Warren got $50,000. And members who were more supportive of Israel received more from pro-Israel donors. On average, $125,000 was the average pro-Israel contribution received. The mixed people got $44,000, and the people who supported the Palestinians received $18,000. The findings have, quote, profound implications for what American policy towards Israel looks like, unquote, said John Mearsheimer, a University of Chicago political scientist and co-authored the 2006 book, The Israeli Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy. Quote, if there was no lobby pushing Congress in a particular direction in a really forceful way, the position of the U.S. Congress on the war in Gaza would be fundamentally different. The group's campaign contributions have varying goals depending on the member. Spending can be defensive or shore up support, quote unquote, in Congress for allies who already share uh, the pro-Israel groups' outlook or views, said Sarah Briner, a spokesperson for Open Secrets, which tracks campaign finance spending and collected the contributions data used in the Guardian's analysis. Spending can also be offensive, quote unquote, or intended to persuade a lawmaker to take a pro-Israel position. Campaign finance observers and political strategists who reviewed the data said the donor's highest profile battles have involved members of the original squad, such as Representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who are among the most critical of Israel. But statements from Representatives Don Bacon, Dan Kildee, and Andre Carson, in the wake of the 7th October attack in which 1,200 Israelis were killed, helped illustrate varying levels of donations and responses across the Congress. All three first strongly condemned the assault's perpetrators and expressed deep sympathy for the victims, but their messaging quickly diverged. Congressman Bacon, Don Bacon, who received about $250,000, offered full-throated support for Israel. Quote, whatever Israel wants, we should be there to help, unquote. Carson, who received $3,000, took aim at Israel, denouncing its, quote, unfair, two-tiered rule over the Palestinian people, unquote, and demanded a ceasefire. Dan Kildee, who received $91,000, fell somewhere in between, underscoring, quote, Israel's security and its right to respond, unquote, and his quote, grave concern, unquote, over its airstrikes killing thousands of Palestinian civilians. Included in the analysis are 33 pro-Israel groups and a number of individuals that work to shore up the U.S. national support, secure military assistance, and steer national dialogue. Its prominent campaign finance players include the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is AIPAC, of course, also the Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI, J Street. The donors are not ideologically monolithic. J Street, which calls itself pro-Israel and pro-peace, and is considered among the most liberal PACs, only gave to Democrats and in some cases backed candidates who are progressive, targeted by more conservative PACs like AIPAC or DMFI. While donors across the spectrum have pressured lawmakers to support Israel following the 7th October, J Street has been among the only group to raise concern about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and express support for conditioning aid to Israel. The groups are a powerful force in U.S. politics that draw comparisons to the National Rifle Association at the peak of its power and spent more on the 2022 Congress than other special interests, such as the oil and gas industry. Former President Obama, in his 2020 memoir, detailed the threat AIPAC presents to Israel's critics, who risk, quote, being tagged as anti-Israel, unquote, and possibly anti-Semitic, and confronted with a well-funded opponent in the next election, unquote, he wrote. In a statement to The Guardian, and AIPAC spokesperson Marshall Whitman said the group is quote, proud of our engagement in the democratic process, as is our right as Americans to advance the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, unquote. The donor success rate is often high. BMFI backed candidates won over 80% of the 2022 races, the group says. PACs such as DMFI and AIPAC's United Democracy Project, the UDP, which was launched during the 2022 cycle, have focused attacks on progressive candidates. The top 6 recipients of pro-Israel donor support in 2022 were centrist Democrats who defeated people who were more progressive in primaries and collectively accounted for around 25 million, or about 42% of the donors' spending. What we found, to determine whether lawmakers were supportive of Israel, Palestine had a mixed response. The Guardian examined the officials' media statements, X accounts, and letters, that's Twitter accounts, of course, and letters to Joe Biden from the 7th of October through mid-November. The unprecedented moment in U.S.-Israel relations has helped bear the extent of Congress's support for Israel. The analysis of Congress members' responses in this period found 93% called for U.S. military or financial support for Israel. 81% supported Israel's response. 17% criticized Israel or called for a ceasefire. 17% contextualized the war, meaning they raised issues like Israeli settlement expansion or human rights violations in Gaza that preceded the 7th of October attack. Some legislators' positions have shifted as the humanitarian crisis deepened and Israeli attacks caused mass civilian casualties following Israel's deadly strike on the Jabalia refugee camp, for example. Senator Dick Durbin and Representative Maxine Waters, who had previously shown stronger support for Israel, called for a ceasefire. Congress has been much more sympathetic to Israeli civilian victims than Palestinian, but party affiliation, not money, predicted lawmakers' statements on civilian casualties. Question: Congress members who received more money on average from the pro-Israeli donors issued statements that were more supportive of Israel than Palestine. Those who answered yes on this received 127,000 on average, and the no's received 26,000 on average. In the area of people who criticized Israel and called for a ceasefire, the no's got 123,000, and the yeses got 34,000. In terms of those who contextualized the war, the no's got 123,000, and the yeses got 36,000. Among those who called for U.S. military support, the yeses got 113,000. I cannot scroll this down to find out what the result was for the no's. Spending pattern detailed in the analysis. Spending patterns detailed in the analysis help explain why war exploded in Gaza, said Stephen Walt, a Harvard University International Affairs professor who co-authored the book with Mearsheimer. Over recent decades, Israel likely would have been unable to carry out many of its inflammatory policies like settlement expansion without a pro-Israel lobby to help secure U.S. arms and political support. Ideas such as U.S. sanctions, withholding military aid, or the U.S. sponsoring a critical UN Security Council revolution are complete science fiction, quote unquote. in large part because of the group's influence, Walt added. Many of the pro-Israel groups have opposed Palestinian statehood and played a significant role in derailing the peace processes, said John Mearsheimer. Quote, if the lobby had worked with any administrations to allow presidents to pressure Israel to produce an agreement led to a Palestinian state, then we would probably not be in this disastrous situation, unquote, he said. Um, um, some groups mobilized against representatives who supported Palestinian statehood. In 2022, AIPAC supported the ouster of the former representative Andy Levin, a Jewish progressive and self-described as a Zionist, in part over his proposed bill calling for a two-state solution and, quote, an end to Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, unquote. Okay, so ahead of Andy Levin's primary, AIPAC's former president sent out a fundraising pitch calling Levin's race against centrist representative Haley Stevens a rare opportunity to defeat arguably the most corrosive member of Congress to the U.S.-Israel relationship, unquote. The race turned into a battle between conservative and liberal donor groups. Donors poured nearly $5.4 million into backing Stevens. She easily beat Andy Levin, who was backed with about $700,000 in J Street support. The Guardian analysis found Stevens to be among the staunchest supporters of Israel's response. She was one of just 12 Democrats who broke with the party to vote for a GOP Israel assistance bill that did not include humanitarian aid for Gaza. Congress members who acknowledged Palestinian civilian victims. The yes votes, 95% of them, were Democrats, and they made up 44% of the Congress. The no votes were 88% of them, were actually Republicans, and they totaled 56%. Congress. The size of the circles depicts the people who got the most money. Circles sized by pro-Israel donor contributions. Yes, that's a Guardian graphic. Congress members who are more supportive of Palestinian causes or neutral prior to being elected, like Senator John Fetterman, also Representative Maxwell Frost, and Senator Warnock, shifted to take more pro-Israel positions after pro-Israel groups made donations or threatened to get involved in a race. The Guardian found Fetterman and Warnock to be more supportive of Israel following the 7th of October attacks, while Frost had a mixed response and has signed on to a resolution calling for a ceasefire. DMFI president, whose name is Mark Melman, said the analysis does not prove that pro-Israel donor contributions influence Congress's position or cause any lawmaker to change their views on Israel. Anyone who posits that is an advocate, not an analyst. Anyone who does not actually at least posit it as a possibility, as a good possibility, is someone for which I have a big bridge to sell. Quote, I'm in favor of changing how it works, but it works that way for every issue, for every progressive issue, for every conservative issue. So there's absolutely nothing unique about pro-Israel community in this respect. unquote, he said, and quote again, not acknowledging that, would be anti-Semitic. I don't know if that would be anti-Semitic, but what I do know is that it shouldn't be working that way at all, because the money shouldn't be there and the donors should not be buying the American political system. In other words, the position that Melman has taken is an anti-democratic position. I mean anti-democratic, of course, with a small d. It's these contributions that are ruining our democracy. Campaign finance experts noted that some congressional donations are given to members because they already share a position, raising a, quote, chicken or egg, unquote, question about the role of the money in members' views. Don Bacon, a former Air Force colonel, said Israel has strategic value to the U.S. and noted he is an evangelical with a, quote, spiritual connection, unquote, to Israel. Dozens of evangelicals serve in Congress, and Bacon said the question of supporting Israel, quote, is a matter of heart, unquote, for many people like him. Quote, my support comes from the time I was 5 years old, and my dad said, quote, those who blessed Israel will be blessed, unquote, which is right out of the Old Testament, unquote, Don Bacon said to The Guardian. At odds with the public, the analysis also highlights how most of Congress is in line with conservative pro-Israel positions, but not with those of the U.S. public. While The Guardian found just 17% of Congress was critical of Israel or called for a ceasefire in the first 6 weeks of the war, U.S. polls show up to 68% of Americans support a ceasefire and around 80%, of Democrats. So who do they listen to? They listen to the voters, of course, and not to the people. Quote, of course, I interjected that just now. Quote, there is no question, unquote, pro-Israel donor contributions spread across Congress drive a disparity, said James Zogby, a pollster and founder of the Arab American Institute. But he believes this is not a matter of more robust public debate because, quote, if you raise the issue of money, then you run the risk of being called an anti-Semite, unquote, he added. Of course, that's what happened, to Ilhan Omar. What she said was it's all about the Benjamins, and then there was a firestorm charging her, with anti-Semitism, fueled by the very donor money. Of course, The Guardian identified 132 legislators who received less than $10,000 in backing, including 33 who received zero but are still supportive of Israel. Well, that includes some Republicans who are ideologically aligned with groups such as AIPAC. Some experts who reviewed the data believe it points to the donors' strength. Their vast spending instills fear across Congress, and AIPAC is the, quote, elephant in the room, unquote, in Democratic campaigns. Said Waleed Shahid, a progressive strategist who said consultants have advised candidates to publicly take pro-Israel positions to placate pro-Israel donors. Quote, there aren't that many lobbies that are willing to spend millions of dollars to unseat you in a primary, unquote, Shahid added. Moreover, most lawmakers represent districts with very few Jewish or Arab American constituents to pressure them on votes, and there is virtually no pro-Palestine lobby to counterweight. Uh, okay, um, 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 said John Mearsheimer. That makes it easier and safer for lawmakers to take pro-Israel positions, he added. 2022, North Carolina's first congressional primary, congressional district encapsulated those issues. Relatively few Jews or Arab Americans live in the area, and the Democratic Representative Don Davis, armed with about 2.8 million in donor support, defeated a more progressive candidate before winning in the general election. Davis, fresh off a junket trip to Israel funded by AIPAC in August, was one of 10 Democrats who in November broke with the party to vote to censure Tlaib and support the GOP Israel funding bill that did not include humanitarian aid for Palestinians. The Congress members have shifted positions or, quote, been silenced on Palestine only because they were afraid of the wrath of AIPAC, said Sama Andrebi, the spokesman for Justice Democrats, which backs progressive candidates. That Democrats on average receive more money than Republicans. Those who the Guardian found were supportive of Israel on average received about 243,000 compared with 52,000 for their GOP counterparts. The next election promises more of the same. A pro-Israel donor has allegedly offered $20 million in backing for someone to run against Tlaib, the nation's only Palestinian-American lawmaker. In fact, the $20 million offer was made to two different people trying to get them to run against her. Not just one, two different people. Representative Jamal Bowman, who was backed by J Street, faces a challenger who will likely receive more support from conservative pro-Israel groups. Meanwhile, Representative Summer Lee, who with around 38,000 in J Street support defeated a candidate backed with millions in funding from more conservative pro-Israel groups, is again facing a challenge from a more pro-Israel candidate. Perhaps the most vocal critic of AIPAC has been Representative Mark Pocan, who received 55,000 in pro-Israel funding in November, said he did not, quote, give a fuck about AIPAC, unquote, labeling it a cancer. Okay, in U.S. politics, the group took GOP dark money and spent it in Democratic primaries, often at levels exceeding candidate spending and across a high number of races, Pocan said. As the strategy pays dividends on the war, he fears it will be copied by other powerful lobbies, which he said could be a, quote, death blow to democracy, unquote. If outside groups, especially in primaries, where so much less money is spent, decide to purchase elections and make them auctions, that really will change the character of Congress in a very negative way, unquote, Pocan said. So Mark Pocan, of course, is very, very right about that. What's the solution to it? You all know what it is. It's a dump the corruption campaign, which we have not been able to get going. A dump the corruption campaign that asks people to vote, according to a rule, that tells people to vote against any candidates taking big money. I'm not going to show the rule again. You know what it is. But the basic point is, if we had a campaign like that, we would clean house in both the House, and also the Senate. Here's another piece. I hope to be much briefer with this piece. This piece is from Truthout. The Israel lobby has given $58 million to Congress, which overwhelmingly backs the Gaza assault. This is from Sharon Jang on January 10, 2024. 42% of the contributions went toward just 6 Democrats who defeated candidates who were more progressive in their primaries. And there's Chuck Schumer talking to AIPAC, speaking at the 2019 AIPAC Policy Conference at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center in Washington, D.C. I guess I should have gone to that. If I had gone to that, I probably could have gotten a really nice free meal. In the most recent election cycle alone, pro-Israel groups have given tens of millions of dollars to members of Congress, who are now overwhelmingly cheering Israel's bloody siege of Gaza. A new report has revealed, according to analysis by The Guardian, the pro-Israel lobby, including AIPAC, DMFI, and J Street, gave over $58 million to members of Congress in their most recent elections. Okay, the donations spanned across Congress, with only 33 members not receiving any donations from the group. Remarkably, the group found that $25 million of this funding, 42%, went to just 6 Democrats who ran against and defeated progressives in their primaries. Single largest recipient was Representative Glenn Ivey, Democrat of Maryland. I made a mistake before. I characterized him as a Republican. Okay, the data showed who in 2022 defeated former Representative Donna Edwards, who the Israel lobby targeted for not being pro-Israel. Okay, enough, as the Guardian noted at the time. Okay, when Donna Edwards was in Congress, and she retired from Congress because she was trying to run for the Senate 1 year, but when she gave up her seat, so she was running again this time. But when she served in Congress, she was a star congressman. She was among the best and most independent congresspeople during her terms in office. She served quite a few terms. I'm not sure exactly how many now, but she was a real veteran, very experienced, very, very good, the kind of congressperson we really want to have, okay, in Congress. She was defeated by this guy, Glenn Ivey, purely with that $7.3 million that the charts and the other articles showed was given to Glenn Ivey. He far outraised Donna Edwards. Pro-Israel groups poured a towering $7.2 million into Ivey's campaign, okay, in order to beat Edwards. Similarly, the pro-Israel lobby gave Haley Stevens $5.5 million to defeat Andy Lennon. He wasn't sufficiently pro-Israel. They also injected $4.5 million into the campaign of Chantel Brown, who defeated prominent pro-Palestinian advocate and progressive Nina Turner. Yeah. Those races, all three of them, made me so angry. The Congress lost 3 great Congress people that they could have had, and instead were elected 3 nobodies who are doing nothing for the American people. The analysis is illustrative of the grip the pro-Israel lobby has over U.S. politicians, both in its power to defeat candidates who have been critical of Israel's violent repression, and in its power to ensure that members of Congress and other politicians stand by as Zionism. According to the report, likely due in part to the lobby's influence, roughly 82% of Congress members strongly supported Israel in the first 6 weeks of the current siege of Gaza, with most of those members still maintaining those positions. Okay, today, Despite ample evidence Israel is committing war crimes in its horrific, um, 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 horrific assaults. Of course, I have to add here that that Israel is being charged with genocide by South Africa, and that the first two sessions of the trial were held at the World Court. Uh, oh, uh, at The Hague, today, and yesterday, they're online, you can see the proceedings, on YouTube. The prosecution by South Africa is comprehensive and detailed, and brilliant, and the defense by Israel, uh, while the lawyers were certainly competent, if you know anything about the issues, involved, the Israeli statements can be refuted easily, one by one. The whole thing comes down to a technical issue, a technical fact-finding issue, as to whether there was a dispute between the two parties, between Israel and South Africa, a dispute that was communicated, to Israel, by South Africa. If there's no finding of fact that there was such communication, between South Africa, and Israel, then the World Court would have to decide against South Africa on grounds that it did not have a jurisdiction to take the case. On the other hand, if South Africa is right that there were plenty of attempts to communicate with Israel and to make the case, to Israel, then it looks like an open and shut case. Many people think it's a textbook case, of genocide. I certainly do. And I think there'll be a finding, against Israel that will have severe repercussions around the world when it comes to public opinion. Whether the United States continues to support Israel and stops any action on the matter officially by the United Nations, the impact on public opinion is going to be severe and is going to hurt Israel for many, many years to come. The average donation amount politicians received lines up with their positions on the matter. And I guess I'm not going to read this because it's basically a repeat of the other article. And John Mearsheimer is also quoted again. And they talk about the John Fetterman case and the Maxwell Frost case. And they talk about some other examples too. They quote a report from Slate found that DC insiders expect AIPAC alone to spend at least $100 million just in the upcoming primaries for the Democratic Party. And the people they're going to challenge are going to be people like Cori Bush, who's a Democrat, very progressive in Missouri. Also Jamal Bowman, Democrat of New York, very progressive. And Ilhan Omar, of Minnesota. All members of the squad have already announced, the opponents, the challengers, have already announced their alliance with Israel in the run-up to their primaries. So that's the end, of that article. So there's one more I want to go through. It's in a different area. It's not, in the Palestine area, but I think it's important. So let me present it here. And if you'll excuse me a minute, I will take some pills that I have been postponing taking. So here's another piece from Truth Out. Business PACs have given election objectors $108 million since the Capitol attacks. That's a big bundle of money. Over 1,400 corporate PACs and industry trade groups have made contributions to their campaigns, or affiliated PACs. This article, is by Anna Massaglia of Open Secrets on January 12, 2024. That is today, of course. And here are the January 6th people. January 6, 2021, Trump supporters breach through the Columbus stores as they clash with law enforcement on the West Steps of the inauguration stage of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021 in Washington, D.C. The photo is by Kent, it's Nishimura of the Los Angeles Times, and it's via Getty Images. Corporate PACs and industry trade have given more than $108 million to election objectors in Congress who voted against certifying the 2020 election results, according to a new Open Secrets analysis of campaign finance reports. Many corporations that vowed to spend or reevaluate PAC giving to election objectors resumed making PAC donations to the so-called sedition caucus, quote unquote, within weeks or months of the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, according to the new analysis, which was first reported by the New York Times. So $108 million given. That, of course, was used in the election of 2022, and probably by itself accounts for the fact that the House turned over to the Republicans. Just that alone, I feel safe in saying that $108 million would certainly make a difference in roughly 6 seats. And the margin the Republicans get a difference in terms of Democrats and Republicans is something like 222 seats to 212 seats. If there was a shift in 6 seats, in other words, the Democrats would have the majority. I think I'm being very generous in saying that it would swing only 6 seats, the $108 million. It would actually probably swing a lot more than 6 seats. Over 1,400 business PACs, which include corporate PACs and industry trade groups, poured more than $91.4 million of that into political contributions directly to the campaign of election objectors. Corporate PACs and industry trade groups added about $16.7 million more to the coffers of leadership PACs affiliated with those same members of Congress. The election objectors' top corporate PAC and industry group run this in 2023. The American Bankers Association, 430,500. Well, I'm not going to go through all of these, but number 1 was the American Bankers Association. Number 2 was the National Association of Realtors. Number 3 was the the Rural Electric Cooperative Association. Number 4 was UPS. Number 5 was Boeing. Number 6 was National Multifamily Council. Number 7 was Honeywell International. Number 8 was AT&T. Number 9 was Lockheed Martin. Number 10 was the National Automobile Dealers Association. Number 11 was the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Number 12 was Coke Industry. Number 13 was Comcast Corporation. How many are there here? The top 20. I've read a lot of them. The other ones are very large contributors also. And the lowest contributor out of this group of the top 20 was $194,000 from Charter Communications. The contributions to the top 20 range from that $194,000 to the whopping $430,500 from the American Bankers Association. And they went to people who voted against certifying the election of 2020, who in other words voted to overturn the election and to throw everything into chaos and keep Trump as the president of the United States. Amazing. Just amazing. Major corporations that have since resumed corporate PAC giving to election objectives include AT&T, Boeing, Comcast, Home Depot, Lockheed Martin. Also, Pfizer, Raytheon, SpaceX, which is Elon Musk, of course. Then, there's Union Pacific, and UPS, Verizon, and Walmart. Or am I mistaken? Is SpaceX Jeff Bezos? I forget. The American Bankers Association, which paused contributions after the January 6th attack, was the top contributor to election objectives in the first 3 quarters of 2023, followed by the National Association of Realtors and the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. These PACs are not necessarily donating funds exclusively to election objectives. Instead, most of the corporate PACs spread money around with little discrimination. Many of the top corporate contributors to election objectives gave to Democrats as well as Republicans. As companies often strive to appear politically impartial, several of the top contributors to election objectives have given about evenly to politicians on both sides of the aisle. That's an important fact, but it doesn't change the fact that the PACs promised to suspend their contributions to those who voted against certification of the elections. Had they gone through with their commitments, there would have been the shift I was talking about from the Republican House, to the Democratic House. One consequence of that, would have been that these periods when we're always looking at the possibility of a government shutdown, there would have been no possibility, of a government shutdown if the Democrats controlled, both the Senate, and the House. There's only a possibility of a government shutdown when the Republicans control either one or both houses of Congress. So if everybody has any angst or wants to blame somebody for the shutdown that is probably soon to be upon us because there's a current shutdown being threatened right now, well, there are many factors that are causing that, but one factor was these large corporations that have decided to keep giving money to the election deniers, the people who tried to overturn the 2020 election. I'm going to skip through the rest of this, I don't think. It's interesting to read, but the basic point is none of these contributions should be allowed. If the rule were followed, all the candidates who took these contributions would have been defeated in the election of 2022. If we're looking at the 2024, if the Dump the Corruption campaign ever really gets started, all the Congress people who are now taking these contributions will be defeated in 2024. So I thought it was important to make that point. Wow. This particular chart deals with 2023 business PAC contributions given to particular election objectors. Jason Smith of the Republican Party got more than $2 million from business PAC contributions. Kevin McCarthy got $1.7 million. Steve Scalise got $1.5 million. And then there are a number of other people who got way into the hundreds of thousands. There's another listing for Steve Scalise. In addition to the 1.5 million, he got another 842,000, which makes him actually the biggest actual recipient of business PAC contributions. And it's not Jason Smith, it's Steve Scalise. People were probably hoping that Steve Scalise was going to be the speaker. Of course, it turned out that he could not get support to be the speaker. Okay, let's see if there's anything else notable here. No. Who is Jason Smith? He served as a top Republican on the House Budget Committee in the 117th Congress. And he now chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, a very vital position for blocking legislation that he does not like. So I guess I'll stop there. I think I've made, the point. This big money has lost us, our democracy. We got to get this Stump the Corruption campaign, got to get it started. We have to have 2024 be, the revolutionary year. It's really the only way to get good legislation passed for us. I have a few comments after the highs and things from Stephen K. We have Jim Bird, who stopped in and who said, "Oh my God, we all know the laws are written for the wealthy. That is the root cause. The Trump situation. It's not his fault. The laws don't hold him accountable. We should be in the streets about the lack of politicians not writing and passing stricter laws to increase accountability. Trump is a symptom, not a root cause." Well, Trump is a symptom, and not a root cause. But Trump still has to be defeated, because he would take us even farther away from having a democracy that we are now. But he also needs to be defeated, because he takes all kinds of PAC and corporate money and gets lots of super PAC support and gets lots of money from individual wealthy people. So, according to the rule, he needs to be defeated. Joe Biden also needs to be defeated. Most of Congress also needs to be defeated, both the House, and the Senate. Supreme Court people need to be impeached, because we now know that they've been taking big money from corporate sponsors. We don't know, exactly how many are, but we know Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito are certainly taking big money, and I expect John Roberts is too. I don't know whether Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh are on the take quite yet, but I suspect they are. I mean, certainly there was big money in back of their campaigns. First of all, to be nominated for the Supreme Court by President Trump, And secondly, to be confirmed, in the Senate. Big money was spent on that. And so they need to be impeached. Andy Candy said, wow, we really do live in a corporate dictatorship. Hey all. And Kay says, yes, we do, Andy. That's the last comment I have. So I am going to say goodnight. And I will see you next. Probably I'll be on one of these shows on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. But I will not be on more than one. So, and for my shows, you probably won't see me again unless something very special happens. You probably won't see me again until Tuesday night when I have my international relations show. Andy Kennedy says, now, is Trump just a symptom? He's a billionaire oligarch. Well, Trump is both a symptom and a cause. I mean, obviously, he is among the causes because he is a billionaire oligarch, and he was giving large contributions in other campaigns in recent years, which probably affected what kind of legislation was passed or not passed, and the fact that most of the legislation was lousy certainly prepared the way for Trump to win the presidency in 2016. So, having said that, I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you all for coming.